Hello, hello, good afternoon, even good evening, hello. I'm sorry I wasn't here last year, so I'm actually making up for a missed appearance last year. I was scheduled to present exactly a year ago, and I was held up at the Supreme Court of Queensland, and Charlie had to make an announcement that I was detained in court and didn't go any further. So let me make it clear, it wasn't to do with something that I'd done wrong or something else. I was an expert witness in a trial, and the judge wouldn't release me. But it's probably just as well that I wasn't able to come last year, because the title of my topic last year was The State of News Media in 2017, We're So Very, Very Fucked. It did seem to be a miserable time, did it not? And there was a feeling that there were so many question marks and so many challenges. And so it is very rewarding to be here this year, where there are genuine green shoots. We're not having parties every week. The rivers of gold have not returned, but there's a genuine sea change in the environment that suggests that certainly the worst is over, and we are starting to transform ourselves nicely. And so what I thought I'd do to start the session is to give you my favorite chart of the current period. So Morgan Stanley don't do a lot of analysis of media, but when they do, they really pull the boat out. So this is a 50-year chart of advertising spending in Australia. And so what you see here is half a century of the industry. And you don't see that very often in any business, but in our industry, which has gone through so much, it's a fascinating story. So in 30 seconds, here's half a century of ad spend in Australia. You ready? Here it comes. Here it comes. Ooh, looking good, looking good. Massively fucked. See that? See that pink line? That's you, that is. There are so many things to pull out of this chart, because obviously it's 50 years worth of data. The first thing to note is at the turn of the century, approximately 70, even 75% of all advertising money went to just TV and news media. That's less than 20 years ago. Now it would account for significantly less than 30%. So it's fair to say we've gone through a disruption that is beyond the ken of even those that have been disrupted elsewhere. But in reality, there are different colors here and different narratives that each deserve their own specific story. Let's start with the incredible, we could call, revolution that has come from what Morgan Stanley have called here the internet, but we would somehow call digital, but not our digital per se. Yeah, this is mostly the duopoly and then some other stuff as well. It becomes, as we'll see later, increasingly difficult to work out what is and isn't digital, but this is the kind of pure play stuff. And it is an extraordinary growth. And it begins only in the year 2000 with the commercialization of search. And then 2007, barely a decade ago, with Facebook beginning to do advertising. I'm fascinated by that moment a decade ago, where Mark Zuckerberg, who at that point had yet to turn 30, he had yet to turn 25, brought all the major advertisers together in a room in New York City and announced to them, as you can see here, Facebook ads, this is the first time they did advertising, represent a completely new way of advertising online. For the last 100 years, media has been pushed out to people, but now marketers are going to be part of the conversation. And so it was this idea that all the boring 20th century useless shit that you guys did, like advertising and targeting and clutter, would be washed away. And they would be replaced by a whole new era of communication in which we would have a dialogue with brands, in which there would be collaboration between markets and companies, in which there would be organic conversations. We would start to have relationships with our toasters. We would start to have conversations with our toast. And it sounds ridiculous now, but we all fell for it 10 years ago. This is long before digital marketing arrived. This was social media and the idea that we could somehow form relationships with brands. Customers don't want ads, we were told. They want a conversation. And it's important to remember how much we fell for that nonsense. Yeah? It's not true. What eventually happened is that social media, the organic stuff, which is largely pointless, not completely, but largely pointless, was replaced by proper digital advertising, led by, of course, Google and Facebook, which involved advertising and targeting and clutter. It was the classic bait and switch, and it's a bait and switch that has worked with spectacular effect, as we'll see. Anyway, so that's Google and Facebook. They're still the dominant players of the internet or digital marketing era. How dominant is a matter for debate. Depends who you listen to. The last people you should listen to are Facebook and Google, who desperately don't want to be seen as being dominant. But perhaps we could turn to Group M, the world's biggest media agency. They do an assessment each year of the whole world's digital media. They take out China, because obviously China has a different closed system. And when they take out China for the year 2017, they calculate that 84% of all digital revenues last year went to these two companies. Off the back of 2016, that's a growth of 186%. Now, those of you with some maths background might be confused as to how you can have 84% having grown by 186%, and the answer is when everyone else is fucking shrinking. But it isn't just the story of the rise of the digital duopoly. There are other very important narratives here. The story of what happened to news media and to magazines is supremely important. As we all know in this room, we came out of the GFC and it never really came back. The rivers never returned to us. But I would not lose faith. This is the come to Jesus slice if you work for news media, because nothing's going to get you on your fucking knees faster than that pink line. That is something that no industry deserves, that even some of the arrogance of our industry at the turn of the century did not quite require. Having said that, this is not as depressing as it appears, because this is a chart that marks advertising spend. And while ad spend remains an important part of the news media business, as we learned from the previous presentation and from others today, it is not the be-all and end-all that it once was. We once lived in an era where 70% of news media revenues came from advertising. Those days will never return. We live in an era now where for most, not all news media, 30% is really the target we should aim for. And the other 70% can come from a variety of places, diversification, or in my opinion, from subscription. I was at Pacesetters, News Corp's sales event earlier this week in Hamilton Island. And if you didn't see the sign saying News Corp, you might have believed that it was some other 21st century company. And I'm sure Fairfax has the same new energy about it as well. There is a new vibe around what's going on. What Damien Eales' team are doing at News Corp is truly spectacular. There is energy and growth and youth and lines that look like that now rather than look like that. There is a new time coming, a new reality for news media. There's a couple of lines we don't talk about which we should talk about. We should talk about the outdoor line, which these days is more digital than traditional. Most of the ads around you here in Sydney, about 72% of them will be digital, not print-based now. So it's really a digital medium, and we should mention that. It's a growing business, as we know. It hasn't really been hurt. In fact, if anything, it's having a very decent 10-year prognosis. And the same goes for radio, also a digital business. In the UK last month was the first month that British radio is more delivered digitally than through broadcast, another digital medium these days. And again, a medium that's in rude health as well. Not everyone was hurt by the rise of Google and Facebook. That's a myth. And then finally, we have to talk about TV. If you read the regular media, you will learn, of course, that TV is totally fucked, massively fucked, incredibly fucked, definitely about to disappear, etc., etc. TV has done a spectacularly bad job of managing its reputation over the last 10 years. I teach MBA students. They think literally TV is dying. Yeah? There's never been a bigger disjuncture between reality and perception, and these MBAs in their late 20s are about to become the clients and the advertisers of the next 10 years. They truly believe TV is on its last knees. So what of that death myth? How is TV performing according to Morgan Stanley? Well, here is the death rattle of television. It doesn't look very deathly at all. Not only was it not affected by the digital duopoly, it continues not to be affected by it. It's not in decline, not whatsoever, not here, not in the UK, not even in the US. It is so far untouched. Just to prove that, this is the latest, literally yesterday, SSI data from America for the first half of the year. Guess which of these two companies took the biggest slice of the pie from all American advertisers from January to June of 2018? Was it Facebook or Google? It was neither, it was Comcast. We don't talk about this enough. Comcast is a big advertising company. So Walt Disney, so is CBS. Sure, Google's there and Facebook's down there as well. The TV companies are alive and well. They're hopeless at managing their reputations, nearly as bad as the TV companies here, but they continue to be a vibrant source of business. The real battlefield for TV, though, is starting to emerge. So if the last decade was about how the digital duopoly totally fucked news media and took most, not all of their money, the next decade is about a very different battle, which, make no mistake, the digital duopoly must win for them to grow, and grow they must. There's no more money left in news media advertising to take, so they must come after TV. Now, for about 2 or 3 years, mistakenly, a bunch of Muppets that work in digital talked about mobile video, as if it was the future. It's not the future. And it's not the future because it's small and really painful to watch, especially if you're trying to watch it with other people. And I used to say this, and I used to get laughed at. What, people won't watch mobile video because it's on a small screen? I'm like, yep, that's pretty much it. If you give me 50 inches or 1 inch, I'll take the 50 inches. And it's basically that simple. And the proof now is pretty clear, as the mobile video revolution has not occurred. This is good data from OzTam. And what you can see down the bottom there is watching any video on a smartphone. You can't perhaps see the right-hand axis. That's basically 3/5 of fuck all, yeah? By a fraction of audience time. It's not what people who are younger and slimmer than me told you 3 years ago at a conference, yeah? Mobile video is the future, and all the mobile video companies, it's pants, total pants. This is what mobile video is. This is a shot of 3 ballerinas during their training in Moscow, breaking out from their ballerina training, I'm sure it's not called that, but whatever, to go and look at the World Cup where the Russian team were playing. And they're all crowding over someone's smartphone to watch the second half. That's how mobile video works. It fills the little gaps where we can't get to a TV, and we find ourselves unable to get to that screen. And there's a little role for that, a really little role. But it ain't the future of video, despite what you may have been told. There is the real challenge for TV. Nestling above watching video on a smartphone, we have other TV screen use, to be defined later. All the shit on a TV, which isn't TV. This is where it gets very difficult to explain, right? Tom had to go many years ago in The Guardian talking about how television isn't television, and confused everyone except me and maybe one other person, right? The point that he was trying to make, and that I'm trying to make, is this is the future of video. Not Channel 9, not Channel 10, not Channel 7. The big square thing on the wall. This is the arena by which everything will be won and lost in the decade ahead. If you want to see the Fairfax and News Corp story played out again, it will play out between 9 and 7 and 10 on that screen over the next 10 years, probably 5 years. The question is, will the, whatever you want to call them, TV companies, traditional channels, will they be able to defend their turf? Or will the foreign assailants, the digital broadcasters, whatever you want to call them, will they be able to enter and take control of the most important portal in the history of technology? This is the game. To put it another way, can 7, 9, and 10 digitize quickly enough to stop becoming redundant? And can the big international behemoths TV-ification themselves, I made that word up, TV-ify themselves quickly enough so they can actually become a legitimate TV player? Now this seems an odd thing, but you mustn't forget a core concept. A concept called core competence. So I'm a business school professor, so I have to bore you with one concept. So in 1999, I was an incredibly arrogant marketing professor teaching at London Business School. And my dream was to always publish a paper in Harvard Business Review, which eventually I did, but that's a different story. And this paper came out by Gary Hamel and the late, great C.K. Prahalad, who were these rock star strategy professors, called The Core Competence of a Corporation. And The Core Competence of a Corporation was an 8-page manuscript. And I read it from cover to cover, and at the end of it, I put the paper down and I said, that's the biggest load of wank I've ever read in my life, okay? What it basically says is, and I'm not really paraphrasing, companies are good at certain shit, and they're not good at other shit. What they should do is work out what shit they're good at, and not do any of the shit they're not good at, because they're not any good at it. That's pretty much the paper, right? It was the biggest load of wank I'd ever read in my life, right? And it really pissed me off. You could get in Harvard Business Review with such wank. And then for the next 20 years, I went and did consulting in Reykjavik and San Diego and Buenos Aires and Sydney and every fucking other place on the planet. Proper consulting, like doing like big brand stuff. And at some point, we'd sit back in a room at 11 o'clock at night, having failed miserably. And I'd say to my colleagues in Sweden or Argentina, why the fuck can't we do this? And they would say to me, we just can't do it. And as I got older and fatter and wiser and grayer, I realized that this paper, The Core Competence of the Corporation, was a work of fucking genius. Because it's true. Companies can't do shit. And therefore, they shouldn't do it. They should outsource it. My point is, on this slide, both these groups of companies have a deficit. TV companies are good at being TV companies, and they're fucking useless at being digital. They're getting better, like a baby learning to take a shit in a potty, but it's not fast progress, right? The digital companies, for all their size and scale, they can't do TV. It's not that easy. These strange, often drunk, weird people that have run TV for the last 50 years are actually really fucking skilled, right? So skilled they don't even know it themselves half the time. Proof is in the pudding, right? 10Play, the 10Play app, is literally the worst fucking app in the history of apps, okay? Not according to me, though I would agree with that statement, it's a piece of shit. According to the, I don't know, fucking 18,000 people who've said it's a piece of shit. It's hard to get 1.8 for an app. You've got to go back and really hate it, right? And I would say to you that the rating of 1.8 is grossly unfair. It should be sub 1, okay? But let's not forget that 2 weeks ago, Amazon ran what is easily the worst fucking TV broadcast of all time, covering the US Open. You see my point? They're both shit at stuff. Who's going to get there first is a massive question. Now, the global guys have scale, but they don't have competence. Now, this doesn't matter because everyone that's not here, clients, already think that the digital guys have got it and the TV guys are buffoons. We've lost that perceptual battle. It's over. I'll give you a good example. Deloitte did a fascinatingly depressing survey of 300 senior marketers in Australia last month and then published the results. I'll pick on two of the many depressing findings. The first one was only 17% of the marketers surveyed believed that building brand was a top marketing objective for their company, right? What? What the fuck is that? The answer is Australia. That's what that is, yeah? Australia, yeah? 4 out of 5 senior marketers don't think brand is a top marketing objective. What the fuck, right? More important than building brand is increasing market share, building customer engagement, and increasing sales. Yeah, well done. Congratulations. I write a weekly column for The Australian, and I wanted to explain this. And I sort of said to Darren Davidson, my editor, or associate editor, whatever, I said, I want to write about this. He went, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And then I spent the whole weekend trying to explain how results like that were possible. And in the end, I rang him back up at a weekend, and I said, Darren, can I use the word shithouse in The Australian? And he went, yeah, that's fine. And so my whole column was basically trying to explain it and just came back to a single clear explanation, which was most Australian marketers are shithouse at marketing, totally shithouse. I absolutely mean it. I totally mean it. I don't care if I sound like an arrogant pom. I mean it. They're hopeless. Not all of them. A fifth of them are. The other 4/5, hopeless. Now, when this article came out, it didn't have a massive impact because most Australian marketers don't read the media section of the Australian. Why would they? Nothing to learn there. But then Campaign Brief took the part that was ahead of the paywall and put it out there with the shithouse stuff and all of that. And it got a really positive response from the marketers that I would regard as my own personal fan club, some of my favorite ones here. Can someone take the microphone away from this guy? The more Ritson stands up on his high horse and petulantly points his finger at the less credibility he has. Yeah, fair enough. Trends shit, digital shit, Marcel shit, digital video shit, brand value shit, content marketing shit. This guy's a one-trick pony. This is my favorite. From Nathan Buckley has gone into a good football coach. He and his edgy contrarian mates bore me because they offer no solutions to help us against the trends they complain about. The column rants are the opinion piece equivalent of an ad without a call to action. Yeah, guys, everything's shit. Everyone's dumb. Facebook is wrong. What fucking ever. But what little thing can I do today at the next tissue session to stem the tide? Now, I read that and I thought I'll give him some help. So I posted underneath his question, be better at marketing. I won't post what else happened. It won't go any further. But that's not the reason for showing you that. The reason for showing you this survey is this diabolical piece of data which tells you how fucked you all are next year. So, this chart, Deloitte asked a stupid question and got a really stupid answer, okay? Deloitte said, what's the best channel for building brand? Now, we'll get back to later on why that's a stupid fucking question, and Deloitte should be ashamed of asking it. But they asked it anyway. They're not very good either, right? Well, they're not if they ask that question. They're not a sponsor, are they, Charlie? No. Fuck for that. Oh, not next year either now, yeah. The answer that came back from marketers was, as you can see here, print and broadcast. About 30% thought they were the best channels, but social media and digital won the day. There we go. Happy days. Happy, happy days, right? And I see this playing out, right, across the future marketing clients. I mean, Melbourne Business School is one of the 2 great business schools of Australia. We do 900 MBA students a year, average age 27, 28. Average salary is 150 when they come out. They're our clients later on. None of them think that TV or news media has any place in their future, okay? When I teach them communications, when I even try and go there, literally, they kind of laugh at me, okay? And I'm one of the scary professors that you normally don't laugh at, but they kind of go, look, mate, you know, you're old, you don't get it, no one watches TV anymore, especially not millennials, okay? It's got to the point where I print laminated cards, okay? For the bit where they laugh, and I go, okay, motherfuckers, I can say that in my class, see? Here's a laminated card, take this with you wherever you go. This is the actual laminated card, okay? It's the get out of jail free card. It comes from Media Post and an article written by Wayne Friedman a couple of months ago. I'll just read you the first bit. I make them read it out in class. On average, in any given minute, the ad-supported multi-screen TV, 18 to 34, millennial audience, is 6 times larger than Facebook and over 2 times larger than YouTube in the summer months, according to the VAB. For example, in July 2017, all traditional ad-supported TV and their online digital platforms pulled in an average minute audience of 5.9 million. At the same time, YouTube is 2.7, Facebook 1.1, Instagram 600,000, Snapchat 500,000, and Twitter 79,000. Now that's millennials. Let's just fucking put the stake through that hard. When looking at the broader TV viewership, everyone 18 years and older, the differences are greater. Traditional TV pulled in 40 million viewers, average minute audience, YouTube 5, Facebook 3, Instagram 700,000, Snapchat 500,000, and Twitter 141,000. The MBA students literally gasp when they see that. Literally, they gasp. Because we've totally fucked up how we've presented our media to future clients. We're meant to be marketers, and we own most of the dominant media in this country, and we've let foreign companies come in and tell lies, and the lies have been believed. And there's no way we can take them back now. It is time to fix this, or at least try and fix it. My recommendation, I'm a huge fan of OzTam, but OzTam is getting too fucking complicated. Yeah? OzTAM's purpose is really very simple. It's to give me that for Australia. And I'll get it in the Australian once a month, and we'll get it into a Fairfax paper. I just want a pie chart using OzTAM, Emma, and Comstor data that just speaks to truth. And every month, it'll hardly change. That's not the point. We have to communicate the share of media time that we actually have. Because trust me, no one except you knows it. We've lost. And we're going to pay for that for the rest of your career. We need OzTAM's complicated data, but it needs to be simplified. It needs to be a big fucking pie chart on page 6 of the Australian and page 7 of the Sydney Morning Herald once a month, and it goes there, right there. That's it. Yeah? We need that badly. Let me show you how you can do this. This is work that was done earlier this year by Ubiquity in the UK. It's the greatest piece of research on media I've seen this year. Its results are sort of working over there a little bit. So Ubiquity, as you know, are probably the only independent company you would trust to do proper assessments of media. At least I would trust them. They did a max diff analysis of clients and agencies, roughly 50-50. So max diff is a really nice way of finding out statistically what's important. You can't ask companies what's important because they don't know. It's a dumb method. But when you do max diff, you get choices, and the choices reveal utility. So there is your top 5. What is really important? And this is a UK sample, but here's the top 5. Targets the right people in the right place, increases ROI, triggers emotional response, brand salience, maybe maximizes reach, but I'd look at those top 4 as the big 4. Now, equally importantly, look at what's down below, because we talk about them a lot, but we'd be flogging a dead horse if we went too far with them. Gets your ad noticed, low cost, campaign frequency, brand safety, short-term sales, transparent third-party measurement. They're not that important to clients, not really, even though we bang on about them. If you wanted to choose your magic 4, at least according to this list, targeting, ROI, emotional response, and salience. Okay? Anyway, so what they did next is they took all 12 variables they discovered, they weighted all of the advertising media that was available to clients across this sample, and they said, okay, you rank each of the media against these 12, and then we will weight it to give it a final score. Now, what you see here is the closest we can get to perception versus reality, okay? So here is what the agencies thought. Here is their top 10. TV was seen as, when you add up all the different things together and weight it, the best medium, then online video, then social media, then out of home, then cinema, and so on. And then this is what Ubiquity said based on the evidence, so a third-party, extremely analytical bit of work on evidence. This is what they said actually is the ultimate list. TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, out of home in the top 5. You will note a couple of these channels have managed to persuade people that they're much more effective than they are. Online video and social media are way down there. And you'll note that 3 particular channels have managed to completely undersell themselves over the last decade: radio, newspapers, and a big shout out to the team at magazines. Yeah? Totally fucking lost. It was a marketing game all along, and you lost it. You lost it. Yeah? Effectiveness my ass. You lost it when you did not market your product properly. All those little fucking trips to California that you didn't do. Having media salespeople selling media, yeah? What were you thinking? All you had to do was be smarter and better, and you missed your 10-year opportunity, and this is the result. They beat you, not with a better product, they beat you with better marketing. So, I think part of it can be explained by the great work of Think TV here. This is one of my favorite studies of all time. Think TV did a big survey of advertising people and a big representative survey of normal Australian consumers. And what they showed conclusively was that the difference between advertising people and normal people was gigantic, no surprise. Yeah? So for example, if you look at who's on Twitter, about half of everyone that works in an agency is actively on Twitter. Only 13% of the average Australian population is on Twitter. Same for Snapchat. Yeah, same for Instagram. There are significant differences. We're just more social and more digital in the marketing and media professions. YouTube, Facebook. That's not a problem. It's not an issue that marketing and media and advertising people are more into Twitter than real people are. We don't pay marketers to be like customers. That's not what they're paid for, right? It's a problem when this happens. When Think TV asked the marketers and advertising people to estimate how many Australian citizens were on Twitter, their estimate was based on their own behavior and not on a more accurate reflection of the population. That is a problem, because it means that marketers are taking their own highly non-representative behavior and applying it to the markets that they serve. And we see it again. So 25% are on Instagram, on Snapchat, sorry. In the estimation of the marketing community is it's 76%. 33% are on Instagram. 89% was the estimate from agency people. So you get the point. They're completely not connected to reality. But I'm also struck by the new book on Trump by Woodward. I was listening to all the reviews over the weekend, and it's not just that Trump refutes facts. He aggressively goes after them and dismisses the source of those facts. The horrible events in Puerto Rico last year, where we now know 3,000 people died. It's not just that he denies that and claims it's 8 or 9. It's that he then claims the Democrats made up the other 2,900 deaths. This is where we kind of are in marketing right now. We are in a post-truth world. These facts will not help us. The ubiquity data is not going to change anyone's mind. So here are my 2 suggestions, knowing what's going to happen next and the 10 years ahead, of how we might sell our media more effectively. First, I would advise that we take the long roads, and I'll explain what that is, and then I would advise us to play heavily on the advantages of integration. So let's start with the long road. I am a firm believer in the holy trinity of marketing. You segment, you target, and then you position. I always have been, and I'm a firm believer in it because it makes enormous amounts of money for the clients I work with. However, my arch nemesis, the evil dark lord of penetration, Professor Byron Sharp, makes the opposite point in his best-selling book, How Brands Grow. And he talks about sophisticated mass marketing in the sense that we should go after everyone. So targeting has become a really difficult challenge for marketers. It began with Henry Ford saying, target everyone. I'm part of a traditional school that says segment and then target and make more money. And I'm not extreme. If you listen to what Facebook will tell you, with quite a lot of accuracy, micro-targeting at a granular level is now possible, and we're seeing the results thanks to President Trump and Brexit, and sometimes commercial results too. Professor Sharp would argue to take us back to a less targeted, more mass marketing place. And this is a genuine debate for most of the big clients in Australia right now. And so exactly a year ago, Byron and I had a debate in London over this very topic about mass marketing versus targeting. We got 5,000 marketers at the Festival of Marketing, and we went at each other 7 bells of shit, as we like to say in academic circles. Byron is not to be underestimated, and I think everyone was taken aback by the violence and lack of respect we both displayed for each other's thinking. That's what academics do. We're not as lightweight as business people. We just get stuck in and then have a beer afterwards, although we didn't have a beer in this case. Anyway, I don't want to talk about the result because it's not important. I smashed him. I totally fucking smashed him. I definitely won. It wouldn't be fair to dwell on that result, but I did beat him like 2-1, 2-1, 5,000 people. Anyway, who's right then? When you look at this debate, should you target or should you go after everyone? And I think the winner of that debate and the answer to the question are these 2 old blokes here. This is Peter Field and Les Binet. Take a good look at them. They're about to own marketing for the next 10 years. They're old. They were old when I was young. They're old account planners from London. They are proper account planners, and they've been sitting on the IPA Effectiveness Awards in London now for about 15 years. That's every good bit of planning out of the UK. They've been looking at it, analyzing it, adding it to their database, what works and what doesn't work. And they've worked out a lot of important stuff. This will absolutely impact everyone, and I'm telling you now, it's the most important theory in marketing in a good 15 years. So they wrote a book called The Long and the Short of It, which is worth a read. But more importantly, they discovered something in a single chart that we need to explore. So if you look at the sales uplift of your marketing and advertising, and you measure it over time, there are two distinct trends. There's shorter term sales activations, the sort of stuff you get from search, from retargeting, which you see a sudden splurge of conversion and then it drops back and then another splurge. You have to keep investing for it to deliver. And then you see a longer term brand building growth, which takes more time to go and which is more akin to using often TV or cinema and other things, more emotional. The point Field and Binet make is if you look at a 6-month window inside a company, all you see is the benefit of short-term activation. You never see the importance or power of long-term thinking, which is why the 4 out of 5 Australian marketers surveyed by Deloitte said that it wasn't important and why revenue growth was important. They're all too short-term to see the future. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean we don't do short-term. It means we have to balance long-term brand building, establishing the brand, and then short-term activation in the right threshold. The analogy I use is if you have a tree, we want to pick the fruit, but we also want to water the tree as well. Short-term picking of the sales, long-term feeding of the brand. If you start to pick too many fruit and you don't keep watering the tree, ultimately there aren't that many fruit to pick anymore. Short-termism in the UK is dramatically increasing in all of the work that Field and Binet see. Now, we don't have data for Australia, but I remind you that 2 years ago at the Effies, which is the most important advertising and communication award in Australia, the judges didn't award any long-term effectiveness prizes because, I quote, "we didn't get any long-term submissions." 200 submissions. No one had taken beyond a 12-month view. Yeah? So what that tells you is we have probably a worse problem here, I think, than we have in the UK. And while short-termism has increased, marketing effectiveness is now starting to drop off a cliff. No one tells you that in marketing conferences. It sounds like it's the fucking future, and some guy gives a speech, oh, it's the best time to work in marketing, programmatic, and ooh, artificial intelligence. Why the fuck are we getting so much worse than we were 5 years ago then? And the answer is because we are getting worse and more short-term. Now, here's the key point that no one's quite worked out yet, but it's about to become massive. The key point is if you drill down into Field and Binet, what they've also discovered is when you look at that short-term stuff, the activation, and you compare targeting customers, like a customer segment, or everyone or non-customers, the best response you get is by targeting very specific segments. So when you do activation work, you want to go after tight targets. But when you do that long-term brand building stuff, that's not the case. Actually, the best results you get are when you go after everybody in the category. What's the balance between the red and the blue? Well, according to all of their 15 years and more than 15,000 case studies, the optimum balance is 40%, or what they now call the 60-40 rule. 60% of your budget should be committed to long-term brand building, 40% to short-term activation. So the real winner of the debate last year was kind of both of us. It's kind of a points victory for Byron, unfortunately. 40% of a good brand's budget should go on more granular segments. It should be more targeted in approach. It should probably be going more towards digital because that is a more targeted medium. And it should be a rational, product-based annual approach. 60% of your budget should go on mass marketing. It should target the category. It should be brand-based and emotional. It should use TV, outdoor, news media, things that have positive wastage. And you should be looking at doing that for many, many years. If you actually look at the breakdown of these things, as you can see here, the average number of very large based effects, you'll see that there are certain media which are good at short-term stuff, SMS, inserts, direct TV, online, search. And there are certain things that are much better at long-term stuff, sponsorship, PR, radio, magazines, TV, outdoor, cinema. You've got 60% of the pie, yeah? if you play your cards right. And in the most recent research from Les last week, he thinks in many businesses, particularly those that spend heavily on advertising, it's not 60-40. Many businesses should be more like 70-30. So the long road gives you an opportunity. The long road says you can and you should have a big share of that pie because it fits what news media, what TV, what outdoor and radio can do. My final point, though, is integration. Digital is now the dominant investment in most countries, which means that we're a minority player, which means that you're no longer fighting against a minority foe. You're now trying to get scraps from their table. And that's not necessarily the worst place to be. There's no doubt what is the best campaign in the United Kingdom this year and what will win every effectiveness award at the end of the year. It's the campaign for KFC. When KFC changed their distributor earlier this year, unfortunately that distributor discovered they weren't much good at delivering chickens. And that resulted in a 3-week absence of chickens from KFC all over the UK, which resulted in interviews with a whole host of British people who really shouldn't be eating fried chicken, complaining that they wanted to eat fried chicken. In response to that, the very talented chief marketing officer at KFC did this. She ran full print ads in all the major British newspapers saying FCK, fuck, right? And then apologizing. And she did it in such a decent British fashion that people suddenly said, you know what, we understand, get the chickens back, we forgive you. This is the story of news media overnight turning around everything. Except it's not. Probably only about 15% of the people that KFC were trying to reach saw those newspaper ads. Most of them saw it reflected in social media. The interaction of the authority and newsworthiness and trust of newspaper advertising was then reflected in the targeting, in the ubiquity of social media. 1 × 1 = 3. In the same way, we see again and again there are synergies. In this case, the question is, should we do TV or should we do online video? It's a dumb question. It's the question Deloitte were asking all those marketers in that stupid survey. What's the best tool? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Would you do TV or would you do online video? You would do both because time after time research shows when you slice the budget, you get a great synergy effect between the two. This is my favorite chart of all time from Analytic Partners. It looks at 3,500 campaigns. It uses a very complex econometric tool to say, what is the impact when we start to use more than one platform or tool? As you can see here, about 29% of the campaigns they analyzed only used one platform. Maybe it was just news media. Maybe it was just Facebook. But the minute the campaigns moved to 2 platforms, let's say Facebook and radio, there was a bump in ROI of 19%. No extra money, that's controlled for, just dividing the money across 2 tools. Any 2 tools will give you a 19% jump. When you add a 3rd tool, it jumps to 23%. When you add a 4th tool to 31%, a 5th tool, 35%. Here is the answer to the ridiculous fucking debate about digital versus traditional. What is the answer? The answer is yes. Yes, I will have them all. And I will blend them together, almost as if it doesn't fucking matter. Because all this digital stuff that you're talking about, it's just tools. And all this traditional stuff you're talking about, they're all digital too, didn't you notice? They're just tools to be blended together, to be integrated into a campaign. I work now with the Effies in New York, the effectiveness people. And if you look at the analysis, again and again in every country, this is Australian results, of what makes a gold Effie, you see a startling picture. So bronze Effies that are pretty good, on average use 4 channels. Silver Effies use 6 channels. Gold Effies use 7. Finalists use 3. The point is, the more channels you use, the more impact you have. This was never a war. This was always about blending them all together. So, in summary, we are entering a post-digital world in the sense that digital won't grow much more, and also in the sense that the word digital has become totally fucking meaningless. When most of our newspapers are making more money from their digital editions, when outdoor is more digital than not, when radio is more digital than not, the D word itself has become meaningless and the change has happened. And it's left us better and less rich than before. Media facts like the stuff from Ubiquity will not save us. It's not possible now to change the perceptions of a new generation of client that believes things that are not true, that scoffs when I show them data like I've just shown you and will not buy into it. And you can never tell a client they've got it wrong, because the minute you do that, they will close their ears to anything else you say. Any of your sales teams will tell you the same thing. The only way to sell someone on a different solution is tell them, oh, no, everything you've done so far is perfect, but because of this thing, we're now going to have to change. You have to find that quickly. And there are two things here that allow you to say, oh, no, spending all your money on programmatic makes perfect sense. Perfect. Oh, it's all definitely working. Yeah. But now there are two things you can do. You can advise them to look at the longer road. You can advise them, oh, no, for short-term activation, for the 30% of your budget, programmatic, Facebook display, perfect. Go for it. I think you've done a great job there. But now see how we have to do the 60, 70% of long-term stuff? You're going to need some news media. You're going to need some TV for that. We're going to need to think long-term again. That allows us to win. And second, you can advise them that A times B will always be greater than 2A. Oh, no, your spend on search makes perfect sense. A, that's great. But just don't spend all of it on search. If you can give me 25% of that budget to spend on news media, to spend on radio, to spend on TV, the B, the effect on the A will be a multiplier, and you'll actually get a better return on the money you're investing. These are the two ways to convince clients that what they've done in the last 10 years is not wrong, but what they have to do in the next 10 years will be different. Thank you very much. Why don't I get Tiki? Why do I get you?
So to state the obvious, I'm not Tiki. Tiki had to leave to
do something more important.
Head into the studio, but you're stuck with me, Mark, as shithouse marketer, possibly.
Thanks,
entertaining and uplifting, as always. Thank you. Get ready for your questions, guys. We'll come to those in a moment, but just a couple from me to kick off. Mark, you talked about a post-digital age.
Yes.
Earlier, Vanessa talked about the UK national titles being referred to as news brands.
Yes.
Have we moved past the opportunity to talk about ourselves as newspapers and print and digital? Should we be talking about news media, news brands?
It's a really difficult question, Charlie. As you know, I don't know what the hell you want to call news media. I suspect news media will win out in the end. There are arguments for all the different titles we might use. Even, we talked about it actually on Monday at News Corp meeting, even when you say news media without the print, it still has a deadening effect on client perceptions. You know what I mean? It shouldn't, but alas it does, right? We still have that perceptual baggage. So I fear it's going to be news media. But yeah, it's a tricky one because I think whatever terminology we use, we've been positioned to be old and out of date and dying, and it'll be tricky for us to turn that around straight away.
Can you think of another industry that's been in the situation that we've been in and have done a good job of changing perceptions and modernising perceptions?
I mean, there's a couple that have done a job where they've really repositioned themselves. Australia's a good example. So the Defence Forces here have done an amazing job in the last 3 years of repositioning careers working for the Defence Forces. It actually won the Gold Effie last week in this room for effectiveness in Australia. And I think that's probably the best I've seen of working out where do we want to change perceptions. But I got to tell you, kids coming out of university and thinking about careers, changing their perceptions of working in the Navy or the Armed Forces is one thing. My message to you is the clients are going to be very hard now to reset or change in their mindset. It's our biggest challenge because we are all out to lunch for 10 years fighting other fires while this perception was going on. Never in my career have I seen that disparity between reality and perceptions so incredibly played out. And you've got to hand it to Google and Facebook. They did a beautiful job of positioning not just themselves, but everyone else. I think we probably helped them as well.
One more before we go to the floor. So hands up if you've got a question. We'll get a microphone to you in the meantime. Mark, you talked a lot about the long and the short of it.
Yep.
Also saw a presentation from Les Binet last week, and some terrific stuff coming out of that with Peter Field. What are some brands either in Australia or if not in Australia, around the world that are doing that well, the short term and the long term?
Look, I'm biased because I work a lot with them, but I really think what Westpac are up to is pretty special. So the Westpac brand within the Westpac group has been applying. We had Les Binet out, when you saw him as well, Charlie, out working with us. We've had the principles integrated into our brand planning now for 12 months. A lot of people ask these questions about what's that, what these ads, who are they targeting, and what's the relevance to Westpac? And the answer is that's the emotional long of it, and you're not seeing the short of it because we've got a different targeting campaign for that going on, and it's working. I think it's really working, and so I think that I really would watch Westpac over the next 36 months because it takes that long to see. I mean, if you talk to Les Binet, he'll tell you it takes 2 years to see the full benefit of a TV ad. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty sure about that with effectiveness data. So yeah, in the next 2 to 3 years, I think you will see Westpac making a big surge forward because they've got this right.
Has that roadmap been impacted by the Royal Commission?
I think it was already in place. I think it more impacts the other banks in the sense that if you look at what NAB have done this week, it's the exact opposite of the long and the short of it. I think it's a noble gesture not to raise interest rates, in my personal opinion. I think it's welcome. As a NAB customer, I think it's a great thing. But the reality is it's a short-term little red line doing this. It's not part of some long, drawn-out positioning to be different or something else. It's exactly what Australian brands have been doing for too long. Short-term reactive stuff that keeps changing. You've got to draw a 5-year line for brands. You have to be able to pay short-term goals, but draw a 5-year journey because that's what the job demands.
Right. Questions from the floor? Anybody? Time for a couple before we wrap it up. Okay.
Madam.
Hello. You touched on subscriptions and you did mention that you were perhaps for subscription markets. Could you maybe explain a bit more about your opinion on that?
Look, I know it varies, yeah? I know it varies depending on the title and everything else. And there's not one fixed model. I defer to the New York Times. I think if you look at the Grey Lady, I think they already are a bigger newspaper than they've ever been. They're about to become the success story that everybody thought they might be. They're a bigger newspaper now than they've ever been in terms of circulation and revenue. I think we're pretty close to that as well now. And I think their model was very clear, having been out there once and seen what they're up to. 30-70 becomes 70-30. And despite what we saw in that excellent previous presentation that I thought was brilliant, their recognition that diversification was a distraction and that in reality, they have to become a subs-based paper with a bonus score that comes from advertising. And I think that has to be the model for a well-run, at least national or major metro news media title. I think that has to be the approach. I think the Australian is doing it remarkably well at the moment. Again, we have this problem where everyone goes, "Oh, the Australians don't." It's having a great time. It's making money. I think, and it has to be our model. My one problem with all of this is The Guardian. I think The Guardian is a fantastic newspaper. I have its app on my phone. It's fucking free, and it needs to stop that shit now. And it needs to stop that shit now because that shit needed to end 10 years ago before we even started it. We trained a whole generation of customers that you could get an amazing newspaper for free. And you know what? We deserve to go out of business for that. What other business in the world could possibly have survived that nonsensical approach? And The Guardian, as much as I love many of their writers, needs to grow the fuck up and stop giving away product for free. They're quite capable of doing it for themselves. You can throw your money out of a window. It's your money. Guardian Trust has lots of money. But you can't do what you're doing to Fairfax. The Australian's not losing, I think, a lot of money because of it, because it's a different segment. But I think the biggest problem for Fairfax in the last 3 years is The Guardian. It's not the ABC. It's The Guardian. Ask all the customers that normally subscribe to the Sydney Morning Herald or The Age, what app have you got on your phone? It's The Guardian, because it's fucking free. right? And I think that therein lies an enormous problem. How can we get people to pay for a newspaper and drive up subscriptions? We have to persuade The Guardian to stop giving away a perfectly wonderful newspaper for free because it's killing everybody else, and it's stupid. Sorry.
We've got one more question down here with Penny at the front.
Mark, do you see, or in obviously your extensive experience, is there any difference between marketing to regional audiences to national audiences? We work in a regional space where we talk a lot about connectivity to the community and the audience.
Yeah.
Is very different to when you're marketing at a national level.
Yeah,
What's your thoughts on that?
It's a great question, and we tend to get caught up in global versus Australian differences, and we don't go into the third level. And to my shame, really, it's not an area I've got much exposure to. I would defer to Damien Eales, really, because Damien is constantly boring me with how passionate he is about regional media, which I really have no fucking interest in at all. And so whenever I go out for dinner with him, it's, well, let's talk about, what's happening in the regional media. And I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, here we go, right? But he's not an easy man to get excited like that. And he's a very good commercial mind. He has seen something in that regional model that I think is both exciting and commercial and different. I don't know what it is because I'm really not interested in it, but I respect him immensely. And I think if he's smelling money and growth, it'll be the first time he's got it wrong in a long time if it's not there. So I'm sorry I don't know more about it, but I know a lot about Damien Eales, and I think he knows what he's doing. And I think he's excited about that as much as anything in his portfolio. So I think the answer is it is different in a good way.
Probably time for one more.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I enjoyed it a lot. In terms of the two tactics you suggested at the end, advising clients to look at the longer road and that A times B is greater than 2A, these are tactics that a client can ultimately choose to ignore or just say, thank you, but no. And it's not going to be something that's going to drive that change in thought and mindset about how we approach this. What do you think is going to be the catalyst that aligns reality and perception, and how long do you think it's going to take?
It's a great question. Perhaps missing from my presentation was the fact that I have no belief whatsoever that we can ever fix the perception gap. It's never going to be 2002 ever again. You're always going to be on the back foot. It's not going to come back. Digital doesn't die, If you learn anything from Facebook with setting up Instagram, they're way better than us, way better. So, we have to accept the fact that don't chase that perception gap, right? I'll give you a good example, back to Charlie's question. Guinness is among the lowest calorie pints of beer you can drink. Yeah, always has been. It's way lower calorie than a pint of Beck's, for example. But they never went with that because trying to change the perceptions that it actually wasn't too bad for you would be incredibly hard to do and not necessarily fit with their brand. We have to have the same approach now, I think, to changing this. If I was my 35-year-old self and full of bullshit and not weary and full of lots of experience of failing a lot, I'd be telling you, change the perceptions and fix the problems. The fucking horse has left the stable, man. We are always going to be seen as not as targeted and not as effective. You're absolutely right. Those two strategies do not restore truth to the world because that's never going to happen now. It's too late for that. Those two strategies enable us to make more money than we're making now, and that's why I'm here. Restoring truth to the world is not something I bring to you today. I come with a message of how can we increase exponentially our gross profits by 25 to 35%. That's why I'm here. And I would suggest those two routes will work. I know they'll work. And in little things, we can make large amounts of money. If there's anything I've learned, it's that. Let someone else try and fix that perception gap. They will fail now. Yeah? We must be realistic about where we are. We have survived. We have improved dramatically because of it. We are different organizations as a result. And it's time to make incrementally more money. That's how you do it. And that lesson, I work a lot with sales reps, and sales reps will always tell you that. You never go into a client and say, well, I used to sell a lot to doctors. The minute you go into a doctor and go, well, actually, that AV that you're using there, that's the wrong fucking AV. That's it. The doctor's like, fuck you, pal, get out of my office. I don't want you to tell me I'm not good. Tell me that I'm amazing, but hey, Because you're already doing that, you'll like this as well. We have to go with the flow. And the flow is hard, and flowing from California, right? But the good news is, particularly the news media guys in the room, we're so much smaller than we used to be that a 20 or 25% incremental growth would be a dramatic shift, right? By playing a minority game. So you're absolutely right, sir. There is nothing that will fix this problem, because nothing will fix this problem. But those two strategies, knowing clients better than media, I reckon they would work pretty good. And my point is, you need to get on the Field and Binet stuff before Google and Facebook do. I have very few skills, but one of them is I know when some shit is coming down the pipe, which is going to be super fucking sexy for every client. That shit is the next 10 years. I promise you. Field and Binet, long and short of it, that's the shit for the next 10 years. And you must ask yourself the most important question that we've never asked ourselves in media, and how can I make money from this? And the answer is the long of it, yeah? You all offer solutions for the long of it, and put Facebook and Google in the short of it, in the pocket, right? That would be a really smart thing to do, but it won't fix the perception problem, which is not for fixing, unfortunately.
Great. So we need to sort out the long of it, which is the News Media Awards tonight. And if we don't wrap up now, we won't sort that out in the short term. So put your hands together for Mark Ritson. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, mate.